Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to my channel, we welcome you. Please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as hitting that bell notification icon to stay up to date to podcasts coming your way. You could also follow me on mindbodyspirit.fm for syndicated audio podcasts on multiple platforms. Today's guest in the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder is Letao Wang. Letao is a renowned astrologer, oracle reader, tarot reader, and he's also a fellow author. Letao is coming to the podcast, recording in his home of Hong Kong. So it's going to be a fascinating conversation. Letao is going to be discussing all things related to astrology, tarot, mythical figures, or heroes as he calls it, in his journey in books. So I look forward to a wonderful conversation with Letao that I know will be uplifting, informating, and inspiring during this time. So without further ado, we bring on Letao Wang on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Letao Wang, it's a true pleasure to have you here as my honored guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm a big fan of your work, and I'm certainly excited to share your vision and what you're currently doing to really elevate the consciousness of people tuning in. But for those who haven't maybe come across your work or your two books, tell us a little bit about what you currently do and your biggest passions in terms of
Mm,
helping people and elevating the consciousness on the
mm,
planet.
so, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be on your show. I got really excited when Brenna told me about you wanting me to come to your show and talk to your audience and things like that. I've seen the books that you published as well, The Wisdom of Jacob's Letter, and I think people like us who work in this industry will all have something in common, because we do believe that one of the biggest roles for us to play in this lifetime is to bring a sense of either healing or some kind of well, being a true helping professional, I would say, yeah, in this lifetime. And that's where we find our value, and that's what we find meaningful, as a professional. And currently I'm residing in Hong Kong, so I think we are 12 hours apart. If are you in New York or somewhere?
12 hours apart. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
I'm right here in New York, right in Hong
yeah,
Kong. So
yeah.
uh, it demonstrates, like you said, how we could be totally across the planet having conversation, and
Mm.
everyone's tuning into the same stuff, regardless of where you are in the world, and that's the universality, of mysticism, of spirituality that we all are tuned into.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, I think we all follow the similar calling, let's put it this way. Because, I would say people who work in this industry, we were definitely not. I mean, of course, some of us, I would say, maybe our parents work in this, in this industry, right? So we were influenced by their work. But I would say most of us are not. And when we were younger, nobody really inspired us, especially within the family environment, right? At least I can speak for myself. I came from a very, very traditional Chinese family, and
Mm.
none of my parents were, including any relatives, right, that I grew up with, siblings, or cousins. None of them were spiritual in any way, and so I was not really exposed to understanding my calling and my mission, not until I was in my early 20s, to be honest. And
Early
so,
to yeah.
yeah, so because I've some people, especially, right, I don't know about your experience, right? Some of the people that I know, maybe they were, let's say they were, I don't know, readers, or maybe they were Reiki masters, and they will say, "Oh, I had my first spiritual awakening when I was 6 years old." That's, to me, that's really rare, right? I mean, there was no way for me to experience that at a very young age. But so when I think about this, I understand that if still we choose this path, it means that it's really meant to be, because we were never really in the environment to help us go on this path. It's a very deliberate decision on our part to pursue this path, and to study it and to master it and to even teach other people how to do it. So
Mhm.
yeah. Mm.
It's very, very intentional, your
Mm.
path, and
100%. Yeah.
you
Mm.
feel a sense of guided force. Now, you mentioned early 20s was when things started to maybe shift for you. Um, and you mentioned, your family dynamic wasn't so, into this as much, or
Mm. Yeah.
it wasn't something that you were bred with. And, some people in this stuff, they have experiences at an early age, or maybe they come from intergenerational psychics or mediums, and that's in the
Yeah.
family. It does
Yeah.
happen. I firmly believe, a soul family connection with this work, but also, potential DNA component to psychic.
Yeah. Mm.
Is as you see, there's an intergenerational component to it. But for you, back to you, you mentioned in your early 20s was when things started to shift. For viewers, could you maybe share a little bit about, what was happening and how you got to that place where you're like, all right, my family gave me what kind of I needed, but, I have something that is a little bit different and I feel called to listen to that versus what
Mm.
maybe, my family ascribed to me and was, good or bad, but I'm deciding, a little bit of a different path than what was intended.
Mm. So my parents were actually very supportive. In my let's say academic pursuit. So my entire undergraduate and postgraduate, this whole time they were there for me, and they were there to help me, and they really wanted the best in me. But the problem was I spent all those years, studying and getting my degrees and things like that. Not because really I felt it was my path, but because I felt it was something I was supposed to do.
Mhm,
And one of the biggest reasons is because everyone was doing it.
mhm.
And as the only son in the family, I mean, this also has a lot to do with our cultural, right, differences. And in a family, a very traditional Chinese family, you have certain responsibilities as a son, and you have certain, you don't really do what you want to do because you have to fulfill your your filial duty towards
Yes.
your parents. And so I was studying, I was doing pretty well in university and also in grad school, but I never felt really passionate about what I did, specifically the
Mm,
more almost towards my graduation. I right before I finished all my degrees and things like that, I suddenly had this revelation that I was not interested in finding a job in this field whatsoever. That's why my undergraduate and my postgraduate were both in translating and interpreting, and I
mm.
was trained to become a conference interpreter after graduation. And for a period of time, I thought I was gonna work for the United Nations. Of course, that was not easy to get into, but I thought that was what I was supposed to do. I don't know if you have seen the movie by Nicole Kidman called The Interpreter. It's a very old movie.
No,
Um,
I'll have to check it out. But that's something that was kind of similar to what you were going through, or
Yeah, yeah. So it's pretty much like, you will have the world leaders, sitting together, around the table, and you have a headset, right? And you're sitting in the glass booth, you're listening to their conversation, you're interpreting at the same time. So we call that simultaneous interpreting. And a lot of
mm,
my postgraduate training was about doing interpreting. And I just thought that was, what I would be doing in the future. But I suddenly lost all my interest. And then what really opened the new door for me was because when I was doing my postgraduate, I was living in Sydney, Australia. And just one day, I was just ambling down the street with a friend, and we saw a very interesting psychic shop.
hmm,
And I had no idea what that shop was about. And when we walked in, there was a guy inside, and he said, "Do you want a reading?" I didn't even know what a reading was. And I was just like, well, I don't know what that was, but I only have $20. If you can do something, sure. Because I was so broke. I was a student. I was a full-time
mm,
student. I didn't have a job. And so I paid $20, and he did a reading for me. And that was almost like, because he was very good at what he did. And so that experience opened a new door for me. And I've never felt so inspired and so um intrigued by something like that in my life. Never. And
Wow.
something clicked at that time, even though I was not aware at that time. I didn't know. Only in hindsight, I realized that that was really the beginning. But that sensation that I felt, that was when I was 24, 23, 24, I think. Yeah, and that was really the first encountering of me trying, understanding. Oh, this is astrology. Oh, this is a spiritual reading and things like that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it could be quite comforting when you have someone who's evidential or credible and you feel, no one, you feel people in your own immediate circle understand you from a certain perspective, but then you're a complete stranger. Someone doesn't know a thing about you. You walk into their office and you feel completely transparent as if they've known you your whole life and they probably know you in a way better than you know yourself. And it could be quite overwhelming to some people. But for viewers, was there any type of information that kind of stuck out in the work that you're doing today? Like I know a lot of people's lives have been changed through going to a psychics, and a lot of psychics or intuitives have seen psychics when they were younger, and now they're doing their work. Like I think of John Edward, and he
Mm,
had someone named Lydia Clark. They were doing his mother, I believe, was doing like a house party or something like that, and she invited Lydia, and Lydia kind of predicted that John would be this big star doing the same work, and he just kind of scoffed at it. I think he was a teenager at the time, and it's like,
mm,
no way is that going to happen. And then, surely enough, things started to unfold, and John Edward
yeah.
became the great John Edward. And it's funny you mention Australia because John obviously has a strong connection to
Yeah, yeah.
Australia with his work. That's like one of his favorite places to go. He lives a couple minutes
Mm,
from where I do, I believe, in Long Island.
yeah.
But for you, I'm just interested. Back to you. Was there anything that they said that was just kind of soul penetrating or in alignment with the work that you're doing today, which we'll discuss, shortly?
Um, I think I don't know if that answers your question yet, but I was very fortunate to meet some especially I would say in my early training days, yeah, as a reader. I was able to study and be inspired by a lot of teachers.
Mm,
Even though I never really spent a lot of time with them, but like mm, well, let's say the two prominent teachers that I actually studied with. One of them is Mr. Anthony Lewis.
mm.
He was one of the two teachers who wrote the foreword for my two books actually. The first time I met him was when I was in New York actually.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so that was probably I would say back in 2014, so
Mhm.
10 years ago when I visited New York. I Because I've always loved his tarot books, so I sent him a letter and I said, I'm such a big fan. I'm so inspired by the books you've written because he's also very big in the horary astrology,
Mm.
and I just loved his books. And so I got in contact with him, and I never expected that he would respond to my letter. And he said he's happy to meet me in New York. And so
Wow.
that's what that's what happened. He doesn't even live in New York. He lived in Connecticut at that time. So he got on a train. He
Oh my
came all
god.
the way from to New York City to actually see me, and we had lunch together. He signed the books for me, and after that we've always been in touch, right? And so we always have this discussion about horary astrology, about the stars. So I was never really studying in his class, right, per
Mm.
se, but I have had quite a few of these kind of encounterings with some of the a really amazing teachers in the field, and I really felt that that was also kind of like a very important part of my spiritual journey, because the universe brought me um, those teachers and those very enlightening souls to me,
Mm.
and that really until today they still inspire me when I'm doing my work.
Wow. As I say, when the student's ready, the teacher, appears, and you've had
Yeah, yeah,
a lot of teachers come in your life, and it's just funny how we could fanboy off of certain teachers and read all their books, see them in libraries, and think that they're just thousands of miles away in some ivory tower. Like we just
yeah,
feel like a pauper at their feet, and then all of a sudden, we send an email, they get back to us, and we
yeah.
find that they're accessible. Like not all. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
some have like
Some. Yeah.
some of like 50 handlers that you have to go through in order to reach them, and even then it's, but it's almost antithetical to what spirituality is about. If you
Yeah.
um, are so unreachable or untouchable, I think
Yeah.
accessibility is important, and not seeing yourself as above someone, but rather understanding you have a light, you connect to it, but that your light is hopefully to allow people to remember their own,
Mm,
and just kind of losing the ego. So again, with a lot
100%.
of this, just trying to find the right wording, but yeah, just this corporate spirituality, or people on this big machines that they're on, you'll find more times than not they're a lot more accessible than you think, and
Yeah.
they're a lot more generous with their time and their energy, and they want to help. If they're there for the right reasons, they understand that your success is our success, and
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm,
so that's interesting. But you did mention the tarot, which fascinates me. For viewers, I mean, I'm just kind of curious as to the historical origins. I mean, I know I was
mm,
having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I mentioned how, I people obviously know I come from the Jewish faith and the tradition. And from my understanding, there's even parts of the Tarot in Jewish mysticism and Kabbalistic teachings, which is fascinating. But from
yeah.
a historical context, I know you mentioned you studied the Tarot. Could you speak to a little bit about the historical context, how it came about, and what the tarot kind of is, some of the myths behind it, some of the stigmas that people might have, because I know when
Mm,
people see
mm,
the death card or the tower card, like some of these images could be quite intimidating. So I'm just wondering
mm,
your perspective on, any advice for people venturing
mm.
into tarot, and if there's any potential,
Yeah.
just labels or warning signs that people should have if they do venture
Mm,
down,
yeah.
much like the Ouija board or stuff like that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issue about people people feeling a little bit fearful towards tarot is because of the images, right? And it's because we don't really know where those images come from, and so we tend to interpret the way we want to interpret them. And one of the typical examples is, for example, you just mentioned there is a major arcana card called the Death. There is also another card called the Devil. And I would say these two major arcana cards are the ones people usually are afraid of. Now, one of the things about tarot is that the way I see each tarot card doesn't matter whether it's a major or a minor card. At the end of the day, they are archetypes. So they're not something that is outside us that will come into our life, either giving us help or destroying us. They are already a part of us. And for example, a very typical thing, for example, when you read a tarot book and you want to know what the tarot, what the devil card means,
Mhm,
one of the common ways to interpret the card is this is about our addiction. Usually, let's say someone is very addicted to, let's say, drugs, or they're very codependent in a relationship, right? And when someone is asking a question about these things, and the devil card tends to show up. But the thing is, the addiction is already in us.
mm,
It's not something that we use a card and the card will bring us that devil. It's because we already own all those 78 different archetypes in us. The cards are just a little bit like a mirror reflecting what we must bring from our subconscious to the conscious level.
mhm,
And so the so-called we're afraid, a little bit afraid to see those images. Deep down, it's actually about us being a little bit afraid to really face the reality that we actually have that tendency in us, because nobody
mm,
wants to know that I'm actually addicted to something. See, for example, if I love sugar, right, and if I keep eating sweet stuff, if you say, I think you're addicted to it, my first reaction might be, Jacob, I don't think so. I don't think I'm addicted to sugar. I just like it. And sometimes I eat it. But maybe I am addicted to it. I just want to deny it. And that's a very common thing that I think as human beings we tend to do, is we don't want to associate ourselves with any negativity. But deep down, we already have those. It just depends on whether we can really have the courage to face them and to challenge, right, ourselves in those things, or we want to run away from them.
yeah,
And and the second thing that you mentioned about the history, right, of tarot. Actually, this is also a great question, because we until today, of course, a lot of different writers, authors, they have written about tarot, but nobody actually has a very clear answer about where exactly tarot is from and who actually invented them. And the earliest history that we can find is from Italy, right? So they say it's in the early days, tarot was actually just a playing card game that people used to do. It was not for fortune telling purposes. And it's very interesting that you talked about the Jewish religion, because yes, the tarot is related to the Kabbalistic tree, the tree of life, and a lot of one of the author that I really respect. His name is Gal Sasson. He's actually from Israel. He lives in LA actually. He's a very famous, he's really good at what he does. Actually, he's very good at tarot and also astrologist. Yeah, and he wrote a book about the Kabbalistic tree of life and how what's their association with tarot and also with astrology. So all these things at the end of the day, I think they're all deeply connected, right? Even when you look at each tarot card, each card is actually associated with a zodiac sign and or with a planet in astrology. So I do think that all these things probably they were developing at the same time. Astrology, tarot, right? Numerology, the numbers. But we don't really know the actual absolute answer of that. Who invented that and whose idea, that was.
Maybe that's the beauty of the enigma of it all.
I believe so, yeah.
Sometimes if you just know exactly where it came from, it gets a little bit boring, but something mystical spirituality has enigma to it, and that keeps us curious and just
100%, yeah.
but yeah, when you do look at tarot cards, like I noticed, like sometimes they've got Hebrew letters on it or numbers on it. So you're spot on where it does take a lot of different schools of thought and principles, and it just seems to combine it in one. But yes, it's almost congruent with the work that I do as a therapist in the mental health field, where yeah, a lot of people, especially in today's culture, which is very much trendy. Certainly a lot of positive psychology that was birthed in Alcoholics Anonymous infiltrates itself into people wanting help. But sometimes, yes, to move forward, you have to look at the wound and the things that are difficult. And sometimes you clear the wound, there's still scars, but you're able to move forward even with those scars.
Yeah.
We live in a culture that has a hard time, seeing themselves for a plethora of reasons. And sometimes really that, you need to look at the things that you need to be objective with the things that are working, the things that may be in your path, and to go through those things. So it's a good reflective tool, as you're saying. Could people objectively have a tarot reading for themselves? So you'd recommend going to someone like yourself or a professional to give a more objective reading? Like as a therapist, it's very hard for people to just self-diagnose or look at themselves, because we could be our biggest critic, but sometimes we have a blind spot with things that are there, and we just
Oh,
can't
100%.
we can't admit some
100%.
of those
Yeah.
things. Like
Yeah.
you said, there's a resistance to the
Yeah.
darkness that we may be experiencing inside of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's very common. Actually, a lot of clients of mine are readers themselves,
Mhm.
but to be honest, I don't even do readings for myself. If I really have a pressing question in mind, specifically if I'm very emotionally involved with this matter, I would actually go to my own teacher. And I would ask my teacher to do a reading for me, because it's very difficult for us to be 100% objective about what you're seeing, and also it blocks your intuition. And the reason is because you already have a desire there. You know what kind of outcome you really want to see. And so once you have a very strong desire, then when you look at the images, it's very difficult for you to be intuitively accurate.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
what it is. Yeah.
yeah. No, it makes complete sense. Can it also be a tool of intuition if you practice it on someone else, though? Because I've had people on my podcast who have mentioned once they
Mm,
started reading the tarot, they didn't take formal classes. They just kind of knew, looking at those cards, really added to psychic imprints about the person. They're able to really understand
mm.
them from a clear vantage point. Why that happens, I don't know. But has that been your experience where you've seen an amplification of your own psychic intuitive connectivity through practicing tarot and reading for people?
For me, I'm not that kind of reader who would just pick up the image and I'll be like, okay, I can already read it, right, just by
Mm,
looking at the picture. I do believe that proper training is needed, because
mm,
at the end of the day, I mean, of course, we can be very, very intuitive, right? A lot of messages can come to us, but at the end of the day, tarot does have a system, and
mhm.
you do have, and it's very important that we do, let's put it this way, we do need to respect the wisdom from, our teachers, right? I mean, they developed this system and they have been working in this field for 50, 60 years, and they definitely know more than we do. And
Right.
so for me, it was I read a lot of books. And of course, when you read a lot of, tarot books, you realize that, okay, these are the common things they all agree on. Oh,
Mhm.
this part, it's kind of interesting because this is more controversial. Some authors say this, but the other author would disagree, right? And
Mhm.
then that part you will have to really use your intuition. You have to ask yourself that, okay, what do you think that
Mhm.
is? But the foundation there, definitely, I would say it requires training,
Mhm.
including not just tarot, but specifically, I think astrology is like that.
Mhm.
Astrology is very, you 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 can be very bookish about astrology if you want to, because
Mhm.
astrology has a very, it's very theoretical, actually.
Mm.
The angles and the aspects, and the degrees, things like that. So astrology, I would say, is more theoretical and is more systematic than tarot, but tarot gives us a little bit more space for imagination, I think.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you have honored something that is a lost art from the culture that you mentioned that you were brought up in, that honored tradition, filial piety. And within the work that you do, it seems like you honor those who have came before you, who have paved the way, and in honoring, their path. And that's evident in the work that you do. And I'm sure that's amplified your work because that's a lost art. A lot of people just kind of think that they exist in a vacuum and they don't honor the
Mm.
predecessors before them and all the wisdom that they had, and that's unfortunate because that could be a great asset to
Yeah,
amplify your
yeah,
work.
yeah. Actually, you know what? There's a reader that who's, very, I mean, I was very inspired by him, yeah, and I learned a lot from him, but he's actually younger than me.
Mm,
So you never know. Sometimes you might be talking to a person who's younger than you, but you realize that, wow, like, where does that wisdom come from?
mhm,
This guy actually is 1 year younger than me. He's also a tarot reader. His name is Raphael. He's a good friend of mine. And I've attended one of his tarot workshops, and I was really, taken aback by his wisdom. And you can tell that this guy is not just a normal tarot reader. He knows his craft. He
mhm,
knows his magic. And sometimes, the way he reads cards, I'm like, wow, how come I've never thought about that? Like, this
mhm.
is a genius. So we always learn things. I always get, a surprise by people from all walks of life. And I
Yeah.
always believe that I can learn something from each one of them, older, younger, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that should be it, where it's like sometimes we see these great lights in this field or these people that we deeply respect and they allow us to honor and see the expansive potential in ourselves. But
Mm.
yeah, I mean, some people are just kind of bored to do this work. And no matter, if you look at basketball, I mean, I could be shooting until I'm 80,000 years old, but I would never shoot the ball like LeBron James or Stephen Curry. I could do the best that I can. But,
Yeah.
at a young age, I mean, these people are just born with a gift that
Yeah.
most people don't have. And how many people play the sport of basketball and they're in the top 2 or 3 in the world? You obviously
Yeah.
have something undeniable, like a
Yeah.
Mozart or a Beethoven. There's just something that you have in you, that will
Yeah.
be this calling. But that doesn't mean that you can't help someone or be the best version of yourself. So there's just different levels to this stuff. And yeah, some people are just they have this undeniable gift that they're born with, and they expand that though. They have to work at it. It doesn't just
Yep.
so absolutely. I mean, yeah, people see Steph Curry, they see him making all these shots, they don't recognize, how many thousands of shots he's taken since a young kid. And so,
Yeah,
yes, he's
exactly,
got the
right?
gift. His father, I watched as a basketball player, but again, he had to work at it like crazy. Same thing with
Mm.
LeBron. And so there's a
Mhm.
gift aspect, but then there's a dedication to your craft, and then there's the inner game and
Yeah.
devotion and resilience and tests that will come for yourself to kind of stick with it, where you're
Yeah.
not just a fair weather fan of this. You could tell that this is who I am. This is my DNA. No matter
Yep.
what's thrown at me, I kind of stick with my foundation. Back to you. I mean, is there something that you feel most passionate about today? I mean, I know you mentioned you have so many interests from the oracle, the tarot, to astrology. Clients come into your office. Is there something today that you're,
Mm, mm.
um, that kind of like gets your heart going? That you feel, like Steph with basketball for you. Like, do you feel like you're in a groove when you do this one thing, or there's a couple things that you really help people out with that get your juices going?
Mm, so uh, these days, I mean, I'm focusing a lot on writing actually.
Hmm.
Not apart from creating oracle decks. I'm doing a lot of writing for online magazines. Writing things for example, spiritual website about mental health, because I had this realization about several years ago. That was probably already 5 years after I started my practice as a reader. I realized that what I was really interested in was therapy. I didn't want to just be a reader to predict people's future, but to be a therapist, you do have to go through training. I'm sure you've gone through all that, right, yourself. And when you want to brand yourself as a therapist and you tell people that I do counseling, you can't just do counseling without proper training, right? You
Sure.
have to study psychology, you have to study the clinical stuff, and then you combine that with your esoteric knowledge. Then the counseling or the therapy that you do will be the best, I guess. So then I went back to grad school, to study and to get my degree in counseling.
Oh, wow.
And then after that, then I went back to my the practice again. Then I realized that that's a complete different level, because where you are doing the cards, where you're doing astrology and things, and but you're also on the other side of the brain, you're thinking, okay, how am I going to apply the cognitive behavior therapy to this
Mhm,
client? How am I going to use mindfulness with them, right?
mhm.
And so I really believe that the powerful session is about half of it is it's that kind of our own sense of mysticism, the astrology or the so-called all the woo-woo stuff, but the other side is the science, is a psychology, and it's an experience that we have studied with data or whatever. And so these days I'm doing a lot of writing about this. For some of them are just purely for astrology websites. In the US, there are two websites that I regularly write for. One is called bustle.com, in a very Gen Z website. Yeah, the other one is called a well and good, well plus good. Yeah, so those I usually talk to those editors about their questions in astrology, and so that's my focus these days. And I'm in the process of creating the third oracle deck, and that's supposed to come out hopefully within a year time. Let's see how the progress is.
I mean, I love that because I think, you know, it seems like you are a jack of many trades, and when a client comes into your office, they don't need to be externally referral to a mental health professional. They could seek you out for spiritual support and guidance, as well as meeting them where they're at in the mental health level. And as you mentioned before, a lot of this stuff could bring up some difficult feelings, and being able
Mm,
to convey it, to process it.
yeah,
And, certainly in all therapeutic practice, it's really about meeting the patient where they're at and being at their level, not being up here, they're down there. And
yeah,
understanding mental health really is able to be able more align yourself where their client is at when they come to your offices, to have a safe environment and to convey
yeah,
it in the right way, because people, as we know, could be drowning and looking for something to hold on to. And you
yeah,
could be that piece with the information. And and you've best positioned your patients with the hard work that you've done, your devotion to education, and your craft on a multiple of levels, to have clients to be in the best interest when they're in the safest place when they come to your office. And
mm,
because yeah, a lot of this stuff, people could be looking for help in the wrong places, or they could come with someone who will make things worse rather than better with what they say, and just how
mm.
cruel or
It's a
dismissive they can be with some of the clients' struggles.
it's a very it's a job that requires a lot of sensitivity, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure when you're seeing your patients, right, we all know this, right? It's sometimes we can also be very much affected by our client's mood, right? And because transference, counter transference, they talk about their stuff, and suddenly that reminds you of some kind of trauma that you have had. And then, but what do you do about this? Do you because the session is not about you, right? It's about the patient, but you're already feeling this turmoil, the feeling in you, and you're already kind of like, I can't do counseling when I'm feeling like this, right? So yeah, I think it's a very tough job, mentally speaking, and that's the reason why, I remember a lot of the when I was doing my master program in the counseling, we had like maybe 80 students in the program, back then. But now, I mean, I'm still in contact with some of them. Most of them are actually eventually not choosing the path of becoming a counselor. Not because they can't do counseling, but because they realize that emotionally it's so burdening for them, and they cannot make it sustainable, right, emotionally speaking. So has off to all the helping professionals on that. And I really think that also people like us, we also have our teachers, we also have people that we go to, right, to talk about our own mental health. And I have a lot of respect for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for some, it could be too overwhelming, too much, but I think you'll
Mm,
know it's when it's a true calling on a
mm,
professional basis. I think in our own level, we could all be of support, be there to
mm.
listen,
Yeah.
but to do it on a full-time basis in a very high level of acuity of cases that come to our offices, you have to really know how to separate
Yeah.
your own reactions, your own feelings, and enter the client's world.
Mm,
Use some of your own, like, I do believe that self-disclosure has value at a certain
mm.
point, to educate, to inspire, but you can't make it all about yourself. It's about the patient,
Correct.
what they're
Yeah.
going through,
Yeah.
and so that,
It's very delicate. Yeah. Very delicate. Yeah.
yeah, you have to
Mm,
pick and choose that,
yeah.
uh,
A little bit is okay. Yeah. Not too much. Yeah. And
that's
also,
right.
I would never do self a disclosure with a first time client.
No, no, I mean, you
Yeah.
build
Yeah.
rapport, you build that trust and really make it about them, but,
Yeah.
as a client, I've had the ability to connect to my therapist,
Mm,
and there's different schools of thought, but when they were able to, maybe disclose something similar in their lives that I was going through and how
mm.
they're able to get through it. So again, patient by patient is different. Like some people, they want to know certain things, but some people will take that information and they'll run with it in the wrong way. So you have to really know the client, meet them where
Yeah.
they're at, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
very much keep its treatment specific to
100.
that individualized case.
Yeah.
But back to astrology, I mean, certainly in the States, there's a lot going on. Here these next couple of months, we've got, and not to, this isn't a political show. We don't get specific, but we do have, an election coming up. It's been a summer of circus, a lot of unprecedented events, from, first time, and I think since the 60s that a president, you know, uh, you know, gave over his second, his running, for a second term to someone else, and there was this assassination attempt. I mean, there's a
Yep.
lot
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
on, and I know a lot of my clients and viewers are just asking, what is going on right now? And I'm just wondering, A,
Yeah.
is this like doom and gloom? And B, are there factors in the stars that have
Mm,
influenced this circus time that we're in? At least in America and maybe the world that we're in. And
mm.
where do you kind of see us these next couple of months based off of astrological forecasting? I don't know
Yeah.
if you.
Well, first of all, because I am I'm in Hong Kong, yeah. So I'm not
Yeah,
really following the U.S. Politics that much.
we're
I'm
not
more
that important.
yeah. Well,
No.
I'm more concerned about our government. You know
Oh,
what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So no. Well, one of the interesting things that I've been seeing is that when Donald Trump was shot, right? And
Yeah.
his left ear or right ear, I don't remember. Yeah, that day was actually when Mars and Uranus was having a conjunction, and that actually was for us, right? We felt like, wow, this actually makes sense, right? Because Uranus and Mars sitting together is very much like that kind of aggressive rebel energy. And because Mars is the energy of aggression, it's military, right? It's guns, right?
Well,
It's attack, right? That kind of energy, because Mars is the god of war. It's very bloody, the red colored planet, right? But Uranus is rebel, it's
Mm.
chaos. It's unexpected changes, it's revolution. So when these two planets are having a conjunction in the sky, you can imagine something is going to happen. And that's actually what happened to Donald Trump, right? So when we're looking at that, and I was like, wow, this is just crazy. But it's also interesting, that why, when you look at Donald Trump, right, as a political figure, right, he has been involved in so many different, criminal cases or, civil cases, right? So much trouble, but still there are so many people supporting him in the
Mhm.
States, right? People love him. They want him to be the president. So sometimes you might wonder, so why is that? Right. And so, but the interesting thing is when you study Donald Trump's birth chart, like his astrology chart, it makes sense why. He actually has his natal sun conjuncting his North Node, and people born with sun conjunct North Node, their lifetime they almost have this a blessing from the universe that they're meant to be in a leadership position in their lifetime.
Mhm.
And also he has his ascendant at 29 degrees in Leo.
Leo.
Yeah,
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 Sagittarian moon, sun in Gemini, June 14th, is it 1946, Jamaica, Queens,
correct.
right?
Right, correct, right. So
Yeah.
the ascendant Leo at 29 degree is a very critical angle, actually.
Mhm.
29 degrees in Leo is basically a position of a very famous fixed star in the sky.
Mm.
And usually that star represents the energy of honor, right? Honor, fame, leadership, courage, and all that kind of stuff. And so when someone is born with their sun conjunct North Node and ascendant at Leo at 29 degrees, you know that their lifetime, they are born to do something big.
Mhm.
Either they're going to be a president, or maybe they're CEO, CFO, whatever. Yeah, that kind of leadership
Mhm.
role, right? And there will be people who will just be blindly following them.
Mm.
And this is what I see this as a universal blessing. So it's what I guess my point is. It's fascinating when you study people's astrology chart, especially when you study modern days. The important people,
Mhm.
and you can go back in history. You look at people, what happened because you already know their life, right? That maybe they lived, 100 years ago, and you look at their birth chart, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's why that makes sense. And
Wow.
so that's what I find very, very interesting. Yeah. Mm. And also,
Yeah,
of course, we studied the new. What's the guy's name that he appointed? Donald Trump appointed the
in
vice.
terms of his VP, JD
Yeah.
Vance.
Oh yeah, yeah. I also had a look at his chart. It's also kind of interesting. Yeah, but yeah. But I'm not American, so I'm not gonna comment on that too much. It's too sensitive in the States, right? About these kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone has an opinion and everyone's a politician these days
Yeah.
in their own right. Like everyone, I remember back the day, like we'd be interested in, politics and certainly lead to debate, but now it's like everyone sees themselves as almost a political figure,
Yeah.
or private citizens.
Yeah.
So I guess the participation is great, but the divisiveness,
Yeah.
and just how we become one big gang is problematic.
It's
Uh,
it,
but
yeah. I mean, I have a friend in the States, and he literally told me he said he has lost friends of because they have different political views. They just can't be friends anymore.
yeah,
And
it's
I think it's quite sad, actually, right? I mean,
It's
why does it
unfortunate,
matter,
yeah.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
do you think
Mm.
these people care about who you are? Do they know who you are individually? And for you, you
Mm.
know someone on a personal basis you've known your whole life. I think, sometimes you have to decide what topics to discuss with people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and certain things you just say, hey, they're not to be discussed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just kind of focus on the common ground. And I think we do that, we do a lot better. And focusing on also the common ground of pain.
Yeah.
People are feeling a lot of pain in the world. And if we're able to focus on that, lead with empathy, that's certainly significant. But yeah, it's just fascinating when you're looking at historical references or individual cases in seeing that there's an explanation for almost everything, which
Yeah.
science really looks at and says, if you look at almost anything, there's an explanation in people's personalities, their trajectory,
Yeah.
uh, whatever you think of a particular candidate, for them to have that great deal of a focus. And on the international spotlight, there's an explanation from what you're saying astrologically. But
Mm.
the next couple of months, are you noticing anything that people should be wary of? Is there a potential good planetary cycle, just for my viewers to understand what's at stake astrologically in the near and imminent future in these next couple of months on a global standpoint, because not everyone who
Huh.
listens to my shows living in America. I know America tends to think they're the
Mm,
city on a shining hill, but there's other parts of the
mm.
world you mentioned, and I'm just wondering for people on an international
Ah,
basis to understand, what's going on in the planets right now.
yeah. So, actually, this year it's okay. So this is how I see this, right? This year is a little bit like something is being prepared,
Mhm,
for the changes and the new beginnings. Next year, 2025, actually is going to be a very interesting year, because next year we're having a lot of our generational planets moving to a new sign. But
mhm,
not this year, right? This year is a little bit like things are trying to change, but they can't change. So it's a little
mhm,
bit like, what's going on? It's a little bit like that kind of energy. But next year, we're having Neptune moving into Aries. We're having Uranus moving to Gemini. We're having, of course, Jupiter will transit into Cancer. We're also having Saturn leaving Pisces, also entering Aries. So all these, generational plan, because they move very slowly, right? When they move to a new sign, it's a big deal. Jupiter, not much, because Jupiter changes signs, once a year anyway. But for Neptune, Saturn, and also Pluto, this year is still kind of like retrograding, from Aquarius back into, the final degree, 29 degrees in Capricorn. But it's gonna next year is going to completely enter Aquarius, and that's what we call the age of Aquarius, right? And I do feel that this Pluto transit into Aquarius actually is quite important for us, because this is really talking about what's going to happen for the next 10 to 15 years for
mhm,
the entire human society. And we can already see some small traits now, because Pluto is, in its best way, it's about transformation. It's about, a metamorphosis. But in the worst way, Pluto is about secrecy. It's about manipulation. It's about abusing a certain power, right? And that's what Pluto does when it's not in its best,
mhm,
time. And then we have to really understand what Aquarius is about, because now Pluto will transit in Aquarius for the next 10 years. Aquarius is a modern technology. So
mhm.
what is modern technology for us at this moment? It's AI, basically, right?
Yeah.
So you can imagine when Pluto is in Aquarius, what kind of manipulation or secrecy or kind of abusing behavior that we can have with this technology that we have. So this year we already see, right, people using AI to either create fake photos of
Mhm,
celebrities, right, things like that. So you can already see when something is on the news. I remember several months ago I saw this news about Taylor Swift.
mhm,
Someone created some really vulgar photos of her and just put it on Twitter, and then Taylor Swift was like, I'm gonna sue those people. It's a big thing, right?
mhm.
And so, that's very much that just to me, that's a Pluto in Aquarius. And that's not gonna be this one time. That's gonna be for the next 10 to 15 years. How do we take advantage of our new technology? But we have
Mhm.
to also make sure that it's all by law. It's within that kind of legal structure there, so that we're not abusing them. Mm,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very important to understanding power,
Mm,
but to be responsible with it. And innovation, is a power, but we have to really be able to be responsible with it and use it in
yeah.
the right way,
Yeah.
not in a way to bring people down or to deceit or manipulate. That's leads to almost downfalls of any civilization. If you look at it historically, when they innovate, it kind of could get to their head. There's the ego that takes over, and they
Yeah.
use all this advancements for destruction rather than unification,
Yeah.
healing, and
Yeah.
togetherness. So that's
Mm,
not necessarily to watch out for. Now, I know you mentioned you have two published books in addition to some of your magazine contributions.
mm,
Certainly, as a two-time author like yourself, it takes a lot of courage to get out there. But what was the writing process for you? Like, when did you come to the point where saying, you know what, it's time to get this book out. It's time to go there because it does take a little bit of swagger and confidence to say, you know what, I'm going to write this thing.
sure. Yeah.
I'm not, I'm going to shoot this shot. I'm not going to, have someone else do it. I'm going to be the guy to do this. Like, how did you get to that point?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I've had this idea about creating these two decks for a long time, and in fact, Oracle of the Celestial Deities. I actually created this deck way earlier. Like, I created this deck back in 2000. 2015, actually. So 8, 9 years ago. And but of course, I didn't write the book, but I created these images, right? So I worked with artists and already had the concept in my mind, and I knew exactly what I wanted, and I knew how to use these cards. I knew the system, I knew the structure, everything was in my mind. But the reason why I was not really bringing this to the world was because I was not confident in terms of verbalizing it in a good way, because first of all, English is not my first language. And the thing is, I didn't want to do this in Chinese. I didn't want to publish this deck in China or in Hong Kong. I wanted to be something bigger than the Chinese market. I want this to be global, right? Everyone can read it across the world. But I was just not very confident in terms of my writing. And of course, I have friends who are, from the States, and, they have been struggling, with publishing as well. And I was just thinking, okay, they're native speakers. They can't even, get a book published. How am I going to, I don't even live in the States. I live in Hong Kong. How am I going to, make this happen? And so I was kind of like, just discouraging myself, for a long time. And then what happened was COVID hit. So 2019, end of 2019, early 2020, COVID hit China. And so everything, was locked down. And then, the whole world, went into chaos. And then I really had the time to sit down with myself and think, okay, now this is time for me to really start to write. And so the writing process really only started back in 2020 and 2021. Those 2 years was the time when I really put a lot of effort into writing, and polishing it as well. Because I'm sure you understand, right? You write and you think, oh, this is so amazing, right? And after 2 days, you read it again, you'll be like, this is shit. you delete everything and you rewrite, right? So it was a little bit like that, back and forth. But the good thing again is that I already had those stories in my mind, because a big part of my early days training with my astrology teacher was mythology, and the Oracle of the Mythic Heroes and also Oracle of the Celestial Deities was very much, both these two decks were very much mythology based, Roman and Greek. So the story was also already in my mind, and I knew how I want to associate those mythical stories with archetypes and with our psychology and the teaching and the meanings. Wow. Yeah, but I just needed to put them in words in a good way, so that people will be able to read it in a pleasantly, and also the publisher will also see this as a treasure. Yeah. To publish it. And I did not want to self-publish. I really want to find a publisher who can see value in my work. Yeah. And so it took, of course, I approached a lot of publishers, and one of them, of course, so my current publisher knows this, right? So I can share this. Yeah. One of the publishers I actually approached was Llewellyn, very big, very huge, right, in spirituality, but they didn't like it. And so they said, they didn't, okay. So they said they loved it, but they said it's not their style. But anyway, right? So sometimes, as publishing it's a little bit like finding your life partner. You can be amazing, they can be amazing, but you have to appreciate each other. Otherwise, this would not work. Yeah. So that was also a hard process to find the right one, right?
Yeah, I would say rejection is redirection, and you found the right house for yourself to be in, and you're with Beyond Words, right? And that's correct. Yeah. And they're a wonderful publishing company. I have a world of respect for their work. But yeah, I mean, congratulations on your books. I'm sure for you, well, we had similar cycles where I was kind of like you, where it was during the pandemic, everyone was freaking out, and I said, all right, let's find a way to fuel pain to my purpose and to get to my own ashram and just kind of do the things that I wanted to do right now. And that's, when both my books were really born out of the pandemic. And I'm sure you felt like it was a birth, like you were letting go of something they were holding on to, that you weren't intended to, that was meant to just, not come from you, but through you to people. And I'm sure there was a catharsis that you felt, a release that you felt when they were finally out there. I would hope. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Because like what I said, a lot of things were already in here for a long time, right?
A lot of wood was burning. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you just finally find the right timing to do it, and be like, okay, this is the time I need to put it on paper. Yeah. So that's it's like a feeling, right? You have. Yeah. When was the right time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, For viewers who are interested in purchasing your books, you'd recommend as Amazon or your website, like where would be the best place to
Yeah.
find both your books
Uh,
and what are their titles? Can
right.
you share that
So
with us?
yeah, so the first one release was published in January this year, called Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, and
Yeah,
the second one was released in June this year, very recent. It's called Oracle of the Celestial Deities, and these two oracle decks actually can be used separately. They can also be used together.
right,
Because they complete the whole mythological journey, basically. The Mythic Heroes is more focused on the mortal heroes' stories and their journey. Heroes such as Hercules, Theseus, Atlanta, Orpheus, and celestial deities more about the gods and goddesses, Zeus, Hera, Artemis, Apollo, right? So when you put them together, and that's the whole basically Iliad and Odyssey, so to speak.
fascinating.
And yeah, and so you can purchase both of them from Amazon.com. It's very easy to find them. You just type the name in, or you can simply type my name as well, just Letao Wang, Letaowang, and the two oracle decks should show up. You can also access my website. My website also has links, but it will still direct you to Amazon. So you can also, access my website is www.thehealingkingdom.com.
Right. And you're on social media as well, Instagram, Facebook, or is that, yeah?
Correct. Yeah. Social media, the most active platform for me is Instagram. So Instagram would be just my name, Letaowang. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Check his profile out. Give him a follow. Now, just out of curiosity, I know there's an audio component to my show, so they may not be able to see this, but for my viewers, I'm wondering, and you could say no to this. Is there a possibility that you could give like a quick oracle card reading for the podcast, just so that they could get a taste of your cards, your style, but also
Absolutely. Yeah.
we have a
Absolutely. Can do.
collective energy that we create here on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, and I'm wondering
Absolutely. Yeah.
if there's one or two cards, quickly that are sticking out for my viewers to just get some insight into their own lives,
Uh huh.
at the time of this conversation.
Of course, yeah. So you can see I've got the Oracle of the Celestial Deities in my hands, right? So
Yes.
I want to make this a collaborative work, right? So
Mhm.
I have the cards and I'm shuffling. I've got 20 cards in my hands, yeah.
Yes.
So why don't you pick a number between 1 and 20 and you say a number for our audience? So
Okay.
you will be the one picking the card for our audience, and I will tell you what this card is.
Okay. I'll go with 13.
13. Okay, so we'll count
Okay.
from the top. Okay, this is number one. Okay.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3. So we got Juno. Okay. The
Okay.
goddess
Juno, and it's a
Juno, right?
beautiful goddess for those who are listening to the audio. Wow, she's just absolutely gorgeous.
Mm.
Um,
So so
yeah.
this is the goddess of marriage and also goddess of the sky. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's very interesting that we picked this card. Juno is actually a very complex character, right? Her Greek counterpart name is Hera. So probably a lot of our audience are more familiar with Hera, right? The name rather than Juno. But it's basically the same goddess, right? One is the Roman tradition, one is the Greek one. Juno or Hera is the queen of the universe, and she married to the most powerful king in the world, whose name is Zeus. So she's a wife. But one of the things about her is, in most mythological stories, we know she's always involved or engulfed in his complicated dealing with her husband, because her husband Zeus is a playboy, right? Zeus is constantly, fooling around with other goddesses or nymphs, or mortal beautiful women, and Juno or Hera was constantly angry with him. Now, one of the things I see this Juno card is about, sometimes we need to know how to simplify our life, and we also need to learn how to draw our boundaries, how to focus on our own mental health and the simple things that we can create and also we can appreciate in life. One of the things Juno actually did was she was constantly involved herself within other people's business. So she kept looking at what her husband is doing, what
Mhm.
other gods and goddesses are doing, and that could actually disrupt her peace a lot. In myth, there's actually a very interesting episode. Every year, Juno or Hera would go back to her mother's house. And there's a magical spring there, and she will bathe herself in the spring, and that's when she regain her virginity, and she will become a virgin. She will become a maiden again, and she will go back to her husband, and then she felt life is pure and simple again. And that mythical story tells us that the fact that she goes back to that magical spring is to find her purity, is to find the simplicity of life, and then she feels that, well, actually, I'm not being engulfed by other people's drama, other people's, dealings. And I have my life and I know what I want. So sometimes with the Junos card, the best advice I can have for people who are listening to this, our podcast, is if you feel that somehow you are very anxious or you're going through a little bit dark time, it's important that you find your own springtime. And it's important that you find your own sacred sanctuary and simplify your life at this moment. Sometimes drawing some boundaries is also important. Find your balance.
Wow. Very much congruent with everything going in the stars on a global basis with all the chaos on the outside, to find that eye in the hurricane, to really keep the main focus in yourself, and to allow yourself to think globally by acting locally, focusing on your own life, and what's around you instead of focusing on everything out of your context of control. So,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful analysis for myself, and I'm sure all of my viewers truly apply during these next couple of months and throughout life as well. Well, Letao, it was a true pleasure having you here on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. And obviously, for those who do want to find you, your website are in all our descriptives, that they're interested in any upcoming events that you might have, or individualized sessions or books. Once again, your website is
www.thehealingkingdom.com.
You can find him there. Letao Wang, you're welcome back at any time. It's a pleasure. I deeply admire how you have a sense of, in my estimation, I know you're a humble man, but a sense of mastery in a lot of different areas and unique parts of mysticism and spirituality that I know are helping many on the planet. And I do applaud your courage for being able to go forward with this stuff, despite some of the oppositional forces. And you're doing amazing things in this world. And the channel is very honored to have you. And I know many viewers will take a lot out of this conversation. Look forward to future dialogue, down the road.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really glad that we can connect. I'm sure that we will connect or maybe have more collaboration in the future.
I love it. Hey, you're in NYC. Just let me know, okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Letao Wang, thank you. Well, that was a wonderful conversation with Letao. I was really able to learn a lot about the tarot, astrology, and I know many of you will take a lot of powerful information to apply in your life, including the astrological forecasts that are at hand for today, as well as a powerful oracle reading that Letao did for the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder audience that I know will stick with many. So thank you all for tuning in to a wonderful conversation with Letao, and we'll see you here soon. Back here on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder, we'll continue to ascend and climb, grow and evolve the eternal ladder of life. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you soon.